Hello, survivors. Thanks for joining us today. Before we begin, if you enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot. Also, tell us in the comments which city you're listening from. It's great to see how far our community reaches. Now, let's start the story. The blare of a nearby horn was the soundtrack to my personal purgatory. 3 lanes wide, bumper to bumper, shimmering heat rising off the asphalt even though it was barely past 11 in the morning. The Independence Bridge. My daily commute, nemesis, transformed today into something truly special. A parking lot suspended 50 feet above the murky brown water of the river. I drummed my fingers on the steering wheel of my beat-up sedan, glancing at the clock. 11:17 a.m., already 20 minutes sitting here, inching forward maybe 10 feet in total. Up ahead, beyond the first gentle arc of the suspension cables, I could see the reason. Flashing lights, ambulance, police, maybe a fire truck. Looked like a nasty accident right at the midpoint bottleneck where the lanes narrowed. Typical. Tuesday? My name's Mark. I work tech support downtown, a job that mostly involves telling people to turn things off and on again. The highlight of my day is usually the drive home across this bridge, back to the quiet suburbs, back to my wife Lisa and our little girl Chloe. Today though, even the thought of them didn't ease the frustration simmering under my collar. I switched the radio from the droning talk show host complaining about city taxes to a music station, hoping some generic pop would numb the boredom. Static. I tried another station. More static, punctuated by faint, distorted voices. Weird. Usually reception was fine up here. The guy behind me, driving a ridiculously oversized pickup truck, laid on his horn again, a long, obnoxious blast. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Mid-40s, red-faced, already looking like he was about to have an aneurysm. Relax, buddy, I thought. We're all stuck. Ahead of me, a young woman in a minivan, Sarah, I think her name tag read when she paid the toll earlier, had turned around to check on a kid in the back seat. Her car was plastered with kid-friendly stickers. She caught my eye in her mirror and offered a small, weary smile, the universal sign language of shared traffic misery. I nodded back. My phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. Traffic bad? Heard sirens. I typed back quickly. Bridge is jammed, accident, might be late. Another buzz almost immediately. Okay, getting weird reports from downtown though. Power outages, be careful. Before I could reply, a new sound cut through the ambient noise. Not sirens this time, but screaming. High-pitched, terrified screams coming from further up the bridge. Horns started blaring again, not in frustration now, but panic. People were getting out of their cars near the accident site, pointing, some scrambling back into their vehicles. What the hell? The pickup driver behind me, Ben, I mentally christened him, was out of his truck now, craning his neck, yelling something I couldn't hear over the din. Sarah in the minivan ahead looked frantic, trying to see past the cars in front of her, while keeping an eye on her kid. The flashing lights up ahead weren't just emergency vehicles anymore. Something else was moving erratically between the stopped cars. Figures stumbling, lurching. Even from this distance, maybe a quarter mile, their movements looked wrong. Stiff-legged, jerky, like bad stop-motion animation. Then one of them scrambled onto the hood of a police car near the original accident scene. It wasn't wearing a uniform. It looked ragged, blood-stained. It turned impossibly fast and launched itself at one of the officers standing nearby. The officer went down. The figure followed, hunched over him. More screams erupted, closer, now. People were abandoning their cars, trying to run back the way they came, but the traffic behind us was just as solid. There was nowhere to go. My blood ran cold. This wasn't an accident. This was something else. Something from the news. Reports Lisa had mentioned. The fragmented whispers on the radio I'd dismissed. The air crackled with tension. The smell of exhaust fumes suddenly mixing with something else. A faint coppery tang carried on the breeze. My 8 years in the Army Reserves, mostly shuffling papers, but with enough field training to recognize imminent danger, kicked in. Lock the doors. check surroundings, assess threats. The figures, maybe half a dozen now visible, were moving with unnatural speed, swarming the initial emergency responders. I saw another officer fall, a paramedic dragged from his ambulance. They weren't just attacking, they were biting, tearing. Ben scrambled back into his pickup, eyes wide with terror. Sarah was desperately trying to calm her crying child. My own heart hammered against my ribs. The Independence Bridge, all mile and a half of steel and concrete suspended over water, had just become the world's most effective trap. We were caught, bumper to bumper, with chaos erupting ahead and no way to turn back. The screaming was getting closer. The scene up ahead devolved rapidly. What started as a localized incident near the accident site was spreading like a virus itself, rippling backward through the gridlocked cars. People panicked. Some tried to drive forward, smashing into the cars ahead, creating more wreckage. Others abandoned their vehicles, attempting to weave through the standstill on foot, only to be swarmed by the lurching figures emerging from cars further up. I saw a man in a suit yanked from his BMW, pulled down by 3 attackers. His briefcase spilled open, scattering papers that fluttered ignored amidst the carnage. "Oh my God," Sarah, the woman in the minivan ahead, was murmuring, her hands covering her mouth. Her child was screaming in the back seat now, piercing sound that probably acted like a dinner bell to whatever those things were. Ben, behind me, was frantically trying to reverse his huge pickup, scraping against the concrete barrier, going nowhere. The sounds were overwhelming. The cacophony of horns, the closer screams, the sickening wet sounds of attacks, the crunch of metal as cars collided in futile escape attempts, and underneath it all, a low, guttural moaning that seemed to emanate from the attackers themselves. My military training kept repeating, assess, adapt, survive. Okay. Assessment. Trapped. On a bridge, multiple hostiles exhibiting extreme aggression, seemingly impervious to injury, spreading rapidly via direct contact, likely bites. Vehicle provides limited protection. Escape routes blocked forward and backward. River below is a 50-foot drop into potentially contaminated water. Not good. Adaptation. Stay in the car for now, lock everything, observe patterns, conserve resources. I had half a tank of gas, a first aid kit, a tire iron under the seat, and half a bottle of water. Survival, don't panic, don't draw attention, wait for an opportunity. My phone buzzed again. Lisa, Mark, what's happening? News is showing riots downtown, military being deployed, answer me. My fingers trembled as I tried to type. Lisa, listen, lock the doors, stay inside, don't let anyone in, I'm stuck, it's bad. Before I could hit send, the screen went dark, no signal, dead. Just like the radio. Complete communication blackout. The feeling of isolation intensified tenfold. Lisa, Chloe, were they safe? Was this happening everywhere? The questions hammered at me, threatening to overwhelm the discipline I was trying to maintain. Movement caught my eye. Closer now. Maybe 100 yards ahead. A man got out of his sedan, clutching a baseball bat. He yelled something defiant and charged at one of the stumbling figures. The figure, an older woman in what looked like pajamas, moved with that horrifying, unnatural speed, sidestepping his swing and latching onto his arm. He screamed, dropping the bat, trying to pull away, but 2 more converged on him instantly. They pulled him down behind a stalled delivery truck. His screams were abruptly silenced. I reached under my seat, my hand closing around the cold steel of the tire iron. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. I scanned the cars around me. Sarah was trying desperately to shield her child's view, pulling down the sun visor, talking soothingly, though her own face was sheet white with terror. Ben was back in his truck, doors locked, staring straight ahead, gripping his steering wheel like it was a life raft. Were there weapons in any of these cars? Hunting rifles, handguns? Impossible to know. Asking would draw attention, maybe the wrong kind. A police cruiser, lights still flashing, managed to weave through some of the abandoned cars, heading slowly back toward our end of the bridge. Maybe help was coming? Maybe they were organizing a retreat? A single officer, young, looked barely older than a rookie, was driving. He stopped about 50 yards from my position, getting out, weapon drawn, shouting commands that were lost in the noise. "Stay in your vehicles. Help is on the way. Maintain order." His words were instantly proven false. An infected figure, previously hidden behind a large SUV, sprinted toward him. The officer reacted quickly, firing twice. The shots hit center mass, staggering the creature, but it didn't fall. It lunged, tackling the officer over the hood of a nearby car. The officer's gun clattered across the pavement. His screams joined the general chorus of terror before being abruptly silenced. The infected thing stood up. The officer's blood smeared across its face and turned its vacant eyes toward the line of trapped cars, toward us. The last vestiges of hope drained away. The police couldn't stop them. Authority had collapsed. We were utterly, completely on our own, trapped on this steel coffin suspended between a dying city and whatever lay beyond. The rhythmic thudding started about 10 minutes after the rookie cop went down. Someone or something was systematically moving down the line of cars, banging on windows, testing doors. Thump, 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 moving closer. I shrank down in my seat, heart pounding. Tire iron clutched tight. "Don't make eye contact. Don't react, be invisible." The thudding reached the minivan ahead. Sarah's child screamed louder. I heard her trying to shush him, her voice trembling. "Thump, thump," on her driver's side window. I risked a glance. It was the infected officer, the rookie. His uniform was torn, face gray, one eye hanging loosely from its socket. His good eye, milky white with that pinpoint of red, stared blankly at the van's interior. He raised his fist again, slamming it against the glass. It held. He moved on. Next was my car. Thump, thump, on the passenger side. Window? I didn't turn my head, focusing intently on a crack in my dashboard. Sweat dripped into my eyes. The smell of decay, stronger now, seeped through the car's vents. Thump, crack. The passenger window spiderwebbed but didn't shatter. The thudding stopped. I heard shuffling sounds, a low guttural moan, then it moved past. My breath escaped in shaky gasp. It reached Ben's pickup. Thump, thump, thump. Louder this time, more aggressive. Ben yelled something incoherent, fear turning to rage. The sound of the pickup's engine roaring to life startled me. What was he doing? He slammed the truck into reverse, then forward, trying to ram the car behind him, then the one beside him, trying to force a path. Metal shrieked, glass shattered. His actions were drawing every infected within earshot. Figures started converging. On his truck, clawing at the doors, scrambling onto the hood. "Idiot," I muttered under my breath. Panic was as dangerous as the infected. Ben kept ramming, rocking the massive truck, but the gridlock was too tight. He was just digging his own grave. One of the infected, a small, wiry figure that might have been a teenager, managed to smash the driver's side window with a rocket. Had found. An arm snaked inside. Ben screamed, a high, thin sound of pure terror. I saw him struggling, then the infected figure was pulled partly through the window. More converged, tearing at the truck, at him. The screaming stopped. The truck's engine died. Silence except for the wet, tearing sounds. Don't look. Don't react. Survive. The immediate chaos around Ben's truck subsided as the infected finished their work. Some began wandering away, drawn by distant noises. Others remained, clustered around the pickup, their movement slow, almost listless, now that the immediate stimulus was gone. But the incident had changed the dynamic on our section of the bridge. The buffer zone was gone. The infected were now directly behind me. I checked my surroundings again. Ahead, Sarah was frozen, staring blankly through her windshield. Her child was quiet now, maybe asleep, maybe just paralyzed by fear. Behind me, the scene at the pickup was gruesome, something I forced myself not to focus on. To my left, the concrete barrier and a 50-foot drop. To my right, another lane of stopped cars, drivers equally trapped, faces grim. One car over, a man was talking quietly into a dead cell phone, tears streaming down his face. Reality was setting in for everyone. Suddenly, a new sound. Helicopters. Not the news chopper from earlier, but the heavy whoomp, whoomp, whoomp of military aircraft. 3 black helicopters flew low over the bridge. Not landing, not dropping rescue lines, but scanning. Searchlights swept across the trapped cars, lingering on clusters of infected, then moving on. Were they assessing? Planning a rescue? A loudspeaker crackled to life, distorted by the wind and distance. Main indoors vehicle. Do not approach authorized personnel. Containment protocol. Effective immediately. The message was fragmented, useless. Then, one of the helicopters banked sharply, hovering over the bridge entrance on the city side. Something dropped from it. Not supplies, but canisters. They hit the pavement and released thick clouds of yellowish gas. Tear gas? No, something else. The infected near the entrance stumbled, choked, but didn't fall. They seemed confused, disoriented, but not incapacitated. The gas drifted slowly across the bridge deck, carried by the breeze. It wouldn't stop them, maybe just slow them down. But what was the purpose? Then the other 2 helicopters moved toward the far end of the bridge, the suburban side. More canisters dropped. They were sealing the bridge, not saving us, containing us, trapping us here with the infected. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. We weren't waiting for rescue. We were the acceptable casualties. The bridge wasn't a temporary jam. It was designated Zone 0, a sacrifice to slow the spread. The gas drifted closer, acrid and chemical, stinging my eyes even through the closed car vents. I ripped a piece of fabric from my seat cover and held it over my mouth and nose, though I doubted it would do much good. Sarah ahead was doing the same, trying to shield her child. The yellow haze settled over the cars, reducing visibility, adding another layer of nightmare to the scene. The infected seemed less affected than the living. Their moans changed pitch, becoming higher, more agitated, but they kept moving, shambling through the chemical fog. Then, the explosions started. Distant at first, muffled booms from the city side. Then closer, sharper cracks. Demolition charges. They weren't just blocking the bridge entrances, they were severing them. I felt the vibrations through the steering wheel, the bridge structure, groaning under the concussions. Dust and debris rained down from the suspension cables above. Looking back towards the city, I could see a section of the approach ramp collapsing into rubble. They were cutting us off completely. No way forward, no way back. Just trapped survivors and relentless infected suspended 50 feet above the water, sealed in by military decree. The yellow gas swirled around my car, mixing with the smell of cordite and decay. Code Black had just become Code Abandoned. The realization that we were deliberately abandoned, trapped on this bridge as a containment measure, shifted something inside me. The initial shock and fear gave way to a cold, hard knot of anger, and a primal survival instinct I hadn't felt since basic training. Forget waiting, forget help. It was just us, the trapped, against them, the dead. The chemical gas, while not incapacitating the infected, definitely disoriented them further. Their movements became even more erratic, some stumbling into cars, others wandering aimlessly into the fog. It created pockets of relative calm, brief windows where the immediate threat receded. But the gas also stung my eyes, made breathing difficult even with the makeshift filter. Sarah's minivan coughed, the engine sputtering. She was trying to keep the air circulation on, filtering the outside air, but it was straining the old engine. If her car died, she and her child would be even more vulnerable. The explosions on the suburban side echoed across the water. They'd cut off that end too. We were officially on an island of steel and concrete. I scanned the bridge structure itself. Huge suspension cables soared upwards, disappearing into the swirling gas and smoke. Beneath the road deck, a complex web of girders, and maintenance catwalks crisscrossed the span. Was it possible? Could someone climb down, traverse the underside, reach the shore? It looked suicidal, but maybe less suicidal than staying put. A scratching sound at my window again. Not the heavy thudding from before, but a persistent, rhythmic scraping. I risked a glance. A child, no older than 10, face pale, eyes clouded white, little red pinpricks burning in the center, wearing a Paw Patrol t-shirt stained dark with something. Its small fingernails, unnaturally long and sharp, scraped against the safety glass, leaving thin white lines. Its mouth opened and closed, making a soft clicking sound. It wasn't threatening, not directly, just persistent, testing, waiting. I forced myself to look away, gripping the tire iron tighter. The sight of an infected child was somehow worse than the adults, a violation of something fundamental. The gas started to dissipate slightly, revealing more of the bridge. Cars stretched endlessly in both directions. A metal serpent trapped on its perch. Here and there, movement. An infected figure climbing onto the roof of a semi-trailer further back. Another group tearing at the door of a stalled ambulance. But also survivors. People peering cautiously from their vehicles. A small group huddled near the central divider, armed with golf clubs and pieces of broken metal. They were organizing, trying to establish a small defensive pocket. Hope, however faint, flickered. My attention was drawn back to the minivan ahead. Sarah was trying to restart her engine. It cranked, sputtered, died, cranked again. Nothing. Panic flashed across her face. She looked back at me, her eyes pleading. I couldn't hear her through the glass, but I understood. Her car was dead. She and her child were now trapped in a metal box with no escape. I weighed the options. Staying put meant eventual death when the infected inevitably broke through my own windows. Trying to reach the group at the central divider meant crossing open ground, exposed. Helping Sarah? Riskier still. Opening my door, even for a second, was an invitation. But leaving her and her kid alone in that dead minivan. Another infected appeared beside the child at my window. This one was large, bloated, wearing the uniform of a bridge toll collector. Its jaw hung slack, drool mixed with blood dripping onto the pavement. It ignored the child, focusing its dead eyes on me. It raised a heavy fist and slammed it against the already cracked passenger window. Crack! The glass fractured further, lines radiating outwards like a morbid spiderweb. One more hit, and it would shatter. Decision made. Staying here was suicide, moving was suicide, helping Sarah was suicide. Might as well choose the suicide that felt less like abandoning humanity. I beeped my horn twice, catching Sarah's attention. Pointed toward my car, then made a running motion with my fingers. Her eyes widened, then she nodded, understanding. She started talking to her child, pointing toward my car. This had to be fast, precise. I checked the mirrors. The infected toll collector was winding up for another blow. The child kept scraping rhythmically. Behind me, the cluster around Ben's pickup had started moving again, drawn by the toll collector's aggression. I took a deep breath, my hand on the door handle. Tire iron ready on the passenger seat. I waited for the toll collector to swing. The moment its fist started moving forward, I threw my door open, simultaneously yelling, "Sarah, now!" I lunged, outswinging the tire iron hard into the side of the toll collector's head. It staggered, its swing going wide, hitting the car frame instead of the window. Sarah had her door open, pulling her terrified child out. They sprinted the few feet between the vehicles. The infected child at my window turned, distracted by the sudden movement, letting out a high-pitched shriek that drew others. "Get in!" I yelled, pushing Sarah and her daughter into my back seat as they reached my car. The toll collector recovered, lunging again. I swung the tire iron, connecting with its skull. It went down but didn't stay down. Behind me, the infected from Ben's truck were closing in. I scrambled back into the driver's seat, slamming the door just as grasping hands reached for me. Sarah was already locking the back doors. Her daughter, maybe 5 or 6, was sobbing hysterically in the back. "It's okay, honey. It's okay," Sarah soothed, her own voice shaking. I jammed the car into reverse, bumping the ruined pickup, then forward, nudging Sarah's dead minivan out of the way just enough to squeeze past. We were moving, but we were exposed. The cracked passenger window offered minimal protection. Infected slammed against the car as we slowly navigated the wreckage. One managed to thrust an arm through the broken driver's side window of the minivan. As we passed, fingers brushing against my door. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, clutching her daughter tight. "There," I pointed toward the group huddled at the central divider. "Maybe there's safety in numbers." It felt like a flimsy hope. But it was the only one we had. Reaching them meant crossing another lane of traffic, weaving between abandoned cars, all while dodging the shambling, grasping figures that now seemed to be everywhere, drawn by the sound of our engine, the smell of living prey trapped on their bridge. The drive across the adjacent lane toward the central divider felt like navigating a minefield. Abandoned cars, some with doors open, others with windows smashed, created an obstacle course. Infected lurked between them, drawn out by our movement. I kept the speed low, steady, using the car as both shield and battering ram when necessary. The thud of bodies hitting the fenders became a sickeningly familiar sound. Sarah focused on calming her daughter, whose name I learned was Lily. "Close your eyes, sweetie," she murmured, shielding her face. "Sing the alphabet song with Mommy." Her voice trembled, but she sang, a shaky rendition of ABC competing with the groans and snarls outside. It was surreal, terrifying, and heartbreakingly human. We were about 20 yards from the divider group when a large infected figure, maybe a construction worker, judging by the remnants of his clothes, stepped directly into our path, raising its arms as if to stop us. I didn't hesitate, accelerating slightly. The impact sent him sprawling over the hood, his face smashing against the windshield, leaving a smear of blood and gray matter before he slid off. Lily screamed. Sarah held her tighter, still singing. The group at the divider saw us coming. About 10 people, a mix of ages, armed with whatever they could find. Tire irons, baseball bats, a couple of hefty wrenches. One man, who seemed to be their unofficial leader, waved us toward a small gap. They'd cleared between a stalled bus and an overturned van. "Get in here, quick!" he yelled, his voice hoarse. I maneuvered the car into the relative safety of their small perimeter, cutting the engine immediately to avoid drawing more attention. The leader, a burly man in a security guard uniform whose name tag read Frank, helped us out. "Name's Mark," I said, grabbing the tire iron. "This is Sarah and Lily." Frank nodded grimly. "Good to have you. Every pair of eyes helps. We saw what happened back there with the pickup. Nasty." He surveyed our small group. "We lost 3 trying to make this space." His eyes lingered on my cracked passenger window. "They get through that easy," I nodded, working on it. I ripped more fabric from the seats, stuffing it into the cracks, a flimsy barrier at best. Our little island was maybe 30 feet long, protected on 2 sides by the large vehicles and the central divider railing. We had clear lines of sight, forward and back along the bridge, but we were exposed on the lane side. The group consisted of Frank, 2 college-aged kids named Kevin and Maya, armed with bats, an elderly woman named Martha clutching a large crucifix, a nervous-looking accountant named David who kept checking his dead watch, a young couple, Sam, and Chloe, the name jarringly similar to my daughter's, who clung to each other, and a quiet man named Carlos who held a heavy pipe wrench like he knew how to use it. "What's the plan?" I asked Frank, scanning the bridge. Infected were still milling around, some drawn to distant sounds, others just shambling aimlessly. "Plan is to survive until help comes," Frank said, though his tone lacked conviction. "Tried the radios, phones, nothing. We saw the choppers, saw them seal the bridge. They're not coming for us," I stated flatly. "They contained us. This bridge is a write-off." The reality hit the group like a physical blow. Martha started praying softly. David paced nervously. Kevin gripped his bat tighter. "So, what do we do?" Maya asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We can't stay here forever." "The structure," I said, looking up at the massive suspension cables disappearing into the sky, then down at the railing. "Underneath, maintenance catwalks. It's a long shot, maybe impossible, but it's the only way off this bridge besides jumping." Frank followed my gaze. Catwalks? Yeah, they're there. But getting down? And even if we did, where do they lead? Right. Back to shore where those things probably are? Maybe, I conceded. But it's movement, it's a chance. Staying here is a death sentence. Before we could debate further, a new threat emerged. From the far end of the bridge, the suburban side, a low, rhythmic sound began. Chanting? No, groaning. A coordinated, pulsing groan that grew steadily louder. Heads turned, both ours and the infected nearby. A mass was forming at the edge of visibility, pouring onto the bridge from the now destroyed approach ramp. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, moving together, not shambling aimlessly, but marching, a tide of death flowing towards us. "Oh, sweet Lord," Martha whispered, clutching her crucifix tighter. "They're coming," Frank stated grimly. All of them. The scattered infected already on the bridge turned, drawn by the sound, and began moving toward the approaching horde, merging with it, swelling its ranks. This wasn't random chaos anymore. This was an army, and we were directly in its path. The horde advanced relentlessly, a solid wall of decaying flesh and mindless hunger. The groaning intensified, a horrifying chorus that seemed to vibrate through the bridge structure itself. They weren't sprinting like the first few we'd encountered, but moving with a steady, inexorable pace, consuming the space between cars, flowing over abandoned vehicles like a flood tide. "We have to move," I yelled over the rising din. "The catwalks are our only chance." Frank looked torn, glancing at the elderly Martha, the terrified couple, the accountant who looked ready to collapse. "We can't all make it down there, Mark. Not fast enough." "Then we make a stand here? With bats and a tire iron?" I countered. "We'll be overrun in minutes." The decision was ripped from our hands. The leading edge of the horde was less than 50 yards away. Infected we hadn't seen before were among them, some bloated and crawling, others skeletal and fast, a grotesque menagerie of the undead. The bus. Carlos, the quiet man with the wrench, pointed. "Get inside, it's higher, more defensible." It was the bus that formed part of our barricade. Its windows were high off the ground, the door potentially securable. Not ideal, but better than being exposed. "Move!" Frank commanded. We scrambled toward the bus, helping Martha, dragging David, who had frozen in panic. Kevin and Maya used their bats to beat back two infected that shambled too close. I covered the rear, swinging the tire iron, keeping the immediate path clear. We piled into the bus through the emergency exit at the back, Frank and Carlos struggling to close and latch the heavy door against the few infected who had already reached us. Inside, the bus was chaos. Luggage spilled from overhead racks, trash littered the aisle, and the distinct smell of fear mingled with stale air. A few bodies lay slumped in seats, victims who hadn't escaped the initial chaos, their dead eyes staring blankly. We ignored them, focusing on securing our position. "Windows," I ordered. "Check the windows, make sure they're latched." We fanned out, checking each large passenger window. Most were secure, but one near the front was cracked. "Stuff it!" Frank yelled, tearing seat cushions apart. "Block that gap." Outside, the horde surged around the bus. Bodies slammed against the sides, rocking the heavy vehicle. Gray faces pressed against the glass, mouths opening and closing, leaving condensation. Trails. Hands, many missing fingers or flesh, clawed at the metal, creating a horrible screeching sound. We gathered near the middle of the bus, away from the windows, our small group huddled together in the dim interior. Lily was crying again, burying her face in Sarah's side. Martha prayed fervently. David rocked back and forth, muttering to himself. Sam held Chloe, both trembling. Kevin and Maya stood ready with their bats near the front. Carlos and Frank guarded the rear emergency exit. Wrench and tire iron held tight. I took stock. 13 survivors, trapped in a bus, surrounded by hundreds, maybe thousands, of infected, on a bridge sealed at both ends. "What keeps them from just breaking the windows?" Sam asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Reinforced glass," Frank answered. "Harder to break than car windows, but enough of them hitting it enough times." He didn't finish. We could hear the impacts already. rhythmic thuds against the glass and metal. Thump, 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 the groaning outside was deafening, a constant oppressive wave of sound. "We need a plan," Lena said, her voice regaining some of its clinical calm despite the situation. "Staying here isn't sustainable, they'll get in eventually." "Catwalks," I repeated. "There should be access hatches in the bridge deck itself, maybe near the support pillars. If we can get out of the bus, reach a hatch." "And then what?" Kevin challenged. "Climb down 50 feet with them waiting below?" "We saw them fall in the river earlier. They might still be down there." "It's a chance," I insisted. "Better than waiting here to be torn apart." A loud crash from the front of the bus made us all jump. The cracked window had given way. An arm snaked through, grasping blindly. Kevin swung his bat, connecting with a sickening crunch. The arm withdrew, but more took its place, pushing, widening the gap. "Block it!" Frank yelled, shoving more seat cushions into the hole, but they were easily torn away. Infected fingers clawed at the makeshift barrier. We could see faces pressed against the opening, teeth snapping. Suddenly, Maya screamed, pointing toward the back. The rear emergency door was buckling inward, the latches straining under the combined weight of dozens of infected pushing against. Metal shrieked in protest. We were being attacked from both ends, trapped, cornered. The groans outside reached a fever pitch. The bus rocked violently. Glass shattered at the front as the infected widened the breach. The rear door groaned, hinges tearing. This was it, the end of the line on the Independence Bridge. The back door exploded inward, hinges screaming as metal tore. Infected spilled into the aisle, a tangle of limbs and snapping jaws. Frank and Carlos met them head-on, wrench and tire iron swinging, crushing skulls, buying us seconds. At the front, Kevin and Maya fought desperately to keep the creatures pouring through the broken window at bay, bats cracking against bone. We were caught in a pincer, the small space rapidly filling with the dead and the dying. "The roof hatches!" Sarah screamed, pointing upward. 2 emergency hatches, standard on most buses. It was our only remaining option. "Boost me!" I yelled, to Frank. He turned momentarily from the fight at the back, his face splattered with gore, and gave me a powerful shove upward. I slammed my hand against the first hatch release, stuck, rusted shut. I tried the second one, closer to the front. It gave with a groan. Cold, fog-laced air rushed in. "Get Lily up!" I shouted down to Sarah. Chaos reigned below. David, the accountant, tripped and fell into the advancing horde from the back. His screams were horrifyingly brief. Martha stood frozen, clutching her crucifix, until an infected pulled her down. Sam and Chloe were fighting back-to-back near the front, trying to protect each other, but they were being overwhelmed. Sarah lifted Lily toward me. The little girl was surprisingly calm now, her eyes wide but focused. I reached down, grabbing her under the arms, pulling her up onto the roof just as an infected hand clamped onto Sarah's ankle from the aisle. "Mommy!" Lily shrieked. Sarah kicked frantically, freeing herself, blood welling from deep scratches on her leg. "Go!" she yelled, shoving herself toward the hatch. I pulled her up beside Lily. Below us, the bus interior was a writhing mass. Frank and Carlos were still, fighting near the back door, buying time with their lives. Kevin and Maya had fallen near the front. "Frank! Carlos!" I yelled down. Frank looked up, his face grim. "Go! Get the kid clear!" He turned back to the fight, swinging his tire iron into the face of an infected figure that used to be Sam. Carlos used his wrench to cave in the skull of the thing that had been Chloe. Then they were both overwhelmed, disappearing under the tree. I slammed the roof hatch shut, though I knew it wouldn't hold for long. We were exposed on the roof, the wind whipping around us, the groans of the horde below echoing off the bridge's steel structure. Lena had managed to climb up through the other hatch, which she'd finally forced open, clutching the precious data stick. Just the 4 of us left. Me, Sarah, Lily, and Lena. The roof was slick with dew and something else I didn't want to identify. We crawled toward the center, away from the edges. The horde below surged around the bus, some starting, to climb onto the adjacent cars trying to reach us. "Now what?" Lena asked, her voice shaking despite her earlier composure. "The catwalks," I said again, crawling to the edge and peering over. The central divider was about 10 feet below us. If we could jump down, maybe reach one of the main support pillars. Access hatches were usually located there. Movement caught my eye, not from the infected below, but from above. A figure stood atop one of the main suspension cables, silhouetted against the first hint of dawn breaking through the fog in the east. Too far to make out details, but it was watching us. Not infected. Something else. Before I could process this, the bus lurched violently. The infected were coordinating again, pushing, rocking the heavy vehicle. "They're going to tip it!" Sarah screamed, grabbing Lily. We had to jump. "On 3, I yelled. "Aim for the divider, bend your knees." 1. The bus tilted further, the sound of groaning metal filling the air. 2. Figures were starting to pull themselves onto the roof from the sides. 3. We jumped. The impact knocked the wind out of me. My ankle twisted, sending a searing pain up my leg. Sarah landed hard beside me, shielding Lily with her body. Lena landed awkwardly, crying out as her arm bent at a wrong angle. We were on the narrow concrete divider, the drop to the river on one side, the horde-filled traffic lanes on the other. Infected immediately turned toward us, drawn by the sound of our landing. They started climbing over cars, shambling across the narrow space. "The pillar," I pointed, hobbling on my injured ankle. About 30 yards away, one of the massive concrete support pillars rose from the bridge deck. There had to be an access hatch there. We half ran, half limped toward it, Lena cradling her broken arm, Sarah carrying Lily. The first infected reached the divider, stumbling toward us. I used the tire iron, my last line of defense, smashing its skull before it could reach Lily. More were coming. We reached the base of the pillar. Relief washed over me as I saw it, a heavy steel maintenance hatch set into the concrete, rusted but intact. "Help me," I grunted, throwing my weight against the wheel lock. It wouldn't budge, rusted solid. Sarah tried. Lena tried with her good arm. Nothing. The infected were closing in, maybe 10 yards away now, their groans filling the pre-dawn air. We were trapped again, cornered at the base of the pillar, the horde advancing, the river yawning. Below, Lily started crying, a soft, hopeless sound. This was the end. We'd fought, we'd run, but the bridge wouldn't let us go. Just as the first infected reached for Lily, a gunshot echoed from above. The creature's head exploded. More shots followed, precise, methodical, dropping the closest infected. We looked up. Standing on the maintenance ladder built into the side of the pillar, about 20 feet up, was the figure I'd seen on the cable. Dressed in dark, practical clothing, face obscured by shadow and the angle, holding a scoped rifle. They weren't military. They weren't police. They were someone else. The figure motioned downward, pointing insistently at the hatch wheel. Then they resumed firing, picking off the advancing infected with chilling efficiency, creating a small, temporary perimeter around us. "Try again." Lena and Sarah threw their weight against the wheel. It groaned, resisted, then slowly, agonizingly, began to turn. Inch by inch, the heavy hatch cover lifted, revealing darkness below. "Go," I urged them. "Get Lily down." Sarah helped Lena through the opening first, then lowered Lily down into the darkness. The mysterious sniper continued firing, keeping the horde at bay, but more were constantly arriving, drawn by the noise. "Mark, come on," Sarah yelled from below. I hesitated, looking up at our unknown savior, wanting answers, wanting to thank them, but there was no time. I swung myself into the hatch, pulling the heavy cover down just as an infected hand grabbed at the opening. The last thing I saw before darkness enveloped us was the figure on the ladder lowering their rifle and disappearing back up toward the bridge deck, leaving us alone in the echoing darkness beneath the world's end. The darkness inside the pillar was absolute, broken only by the faint emergency lights spaced far apart along the narrow maintenance ladder descending into the unknown. The air was cold, damp, smelling of river water, rust, and concrete dust. Below us, Sarah had already switched on a small keychain flashlight, its beam weak but better than nothing. Lily whimpered softly, clinging to her mother. Lena cradled her broken arm, her face pale and sweat-beaded in the dim light. My ankle throbbed, a dull counterpoint to the fading adrenaline. "Where does this go?" Sarah asked, her voice echoing strangely in the confined space. "Down," I replied, starting the slow, painful descent on my injured ankle. "Maintenance access. Should run the length of the bridge, connect to the anchorages on either shore." Assuming those anchorages weren't also compromised or destroyed, and assuming whatever lived down here in the bridge's underbelly wasn't worse than what we'd left above. The ladder seemed endless, rung after rung, descending deeper into the bowels of the structure. The sounds from above faded, replaced by the rhythmic dripping of water, the groan of metal as the bridge settled, and the distant rush of the river below. Occasionally, a muffled thud from the deck above would travel down the concrete, a reminder of the chaos we'd narrowly escaped. After what felt like an eternity, our feet touched solid ground, a narrow metal catwalk suspended precariously over the dark swirling water 50 feet below. The catwalk stretched away in both directions, disappearing into darkness punctuated by dim emergency bulbs. Steel girders crisscrossed above and below us, creating a complex, shadowy maze. "Which way?" Lena asked, her teeth chattering from cold or shock. "City side is destroyed," I reasoned. "Our best bet is the suburban shore. Maybe the military cordon didn't reach that far inland yet." We started walking, single file, me taking point despite my ankle, using the tire iron as a makeshift crutch. Sarah followed with Lily, and Lena brought up the rear, her flashlight beam sweeping nervously behind us. The catwalk swayed slightly with each step. Rusted sections creaked ominously under our weight. Gaps in the grating offered terrifying glimpses of the churning river far below. Lily clutched Sarah's hand, her small face determinedly brave now, the earlier tears replaced by wide-eyed observation. Kids adapt faster than we do sometimes. We moved slowly, cautiously. The silence down here was profound, amplifying every small sound. The scuttling of unseen things in the darkness, the constant drip of water, our own ragged breathing. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Was it possible the infected could have found a way down here? Fallen through gaps, climbed? We passed several more access ladders leading up to hatches in the road deck, all sealed. We also passed junctions where other catwalks branched off, leading to different parts of the bridge's support structure. Sticking to the main path seemed easiest. After maybe 20 minutes of slow progress, we saw light ahead. Not the dim emergency bulbs, but daylight filtering down from somewhere above. As we drew closer, we realized it was coming from a large gap in the road deck, the site of the original accident, where the chaos had begun. We approached cautiously, peering upward. The scene was carnage. Overturned vehicles, bodies tangled, in wreckage, dried blood everywhere. A few infected still shambled aimlessly among the debris, trapped like us. One of them, a former firefighter, noticed the light filtering down and peered over the edge, its dead eyes fixing on us. It let out, a low groan, and others turned. "Keep moving," I whispered urgently, "don't look up." We hurried past the opening, the groans from above following us for a short distance before fading back into the ambient sounds of the bridge's underbelly. We were halfway across. Maybe a little more. My ankle was screaming. Lena looked ready to collapse from pain and exhaustion, but Sarah kept us going, her focus unwavering on Lily. Then we heard it, splashing sounds from the river below, getting closer, followed by scraping noises on the concrete pylons supporting the bridge. They were climbing. The ones who had fallen or been pushed into the river hadn't drowned. They were climbing up the pillars, finding handholds in the rough concrete, driven by that relentless, mindless hunger. Flashlight beams played across the water, catching glimpses of pale shapes pulling themselves from the river, slick with mud and water, eyes glowing faintly red in the darkness. "Run!" Lena gasped, forgetting her broken arm in her panic. We hobbled faster along the catwalk, the metal groaning under our aced. The scraping sounds grew louder, closer. They were ascending the nearest pylon, the one our catwalk connected to just ahead. We wouldn't make it past before they reached our level. We reached the pylon junction. The catwalk split, one path continuing straight, the other circling the massive concrete pillar. And climbing up the side of that pillar, less than 20 feet below our catwalk level, were 3 infected, their movements spider-like and unnerving. No way past, Sarah breathed. We were trapped again. Backtrack. The gap where the others could see us was too close. Jump, suicide. Just as despair began to set in, I saw it. A small, rusted maintenance platform tucked beneath the main catwalk, accessible only by a short, corroded ladder. There, I pointed. Quick! We scrambled down the ladder onto the small platform, barely large enough for the 4 of us, pressing ourselves against the cold concrete of the pylon. We switched off our flashlights, plunging ourselves into near-total darkness, hoping the infected climbers wouldn't spot us. We held our breath as the scraping sounds reached the catwalk level above us. Wet, shuffling footsteps echoed on the metal grating. They paused, groaning, sensing something, perhaps the lingering scent of the living. One peered over the edge, its featureless silhouette framed against the dim light filtering from above. It stared down into the darkness where we huddled, motionless. Could it see us? Could it sense us? After a moment that stretched into an eternity, it groaned again and shuffled on, followed by the others. They continued along the main catwalk, heading toward the suburban shore, disappearing into the darkness. We waited, hearts pounding, until the sounds faded completely. Only then did I risk turning on the flashlight, keeping the beam low. "We need to keep moving," I whispered, "before more come." We climbed back onto the main catwalk and continued our slow, agonizing journey. The eastern sky was definitely lighter. Now, dawn wasn't far off. If we could just make it to the anchorage before full daylight revealed us. Finally, after what felt like another hour, we saw it, the massive concrete anchorage structure embedded in the riverbank. Stairs led up from the catwalk level to an access door at ground level. Hope surged, fragile but real. We were almost there, almost off this cursed bridge. As we climbed the final set of stairs, the sounds of the city, or what was left of it, reached us again. Distant sirens, sporadic gunfire, the constant low moan that was now the background noise of the world. The access door was heavy steel but unlocked. I pushed it open cautiously, peering out. We emerged into tall weeds at the base of the bridge, hidden from the main road above. The suburban neighborhood spread out before us, eerily quiet in the pre-dawn light. No immediate sign of infected. We'd made it. We were off the bridge. But as we stood there, catching our breath, leaning on each other for support, a new sound reached us. Not the groans of the infected, but the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of helicopter rotors. Getting closer. Military, rescue, or the same ones who had sealed the bridge. A spotlight stabbed down from the sky, sweeping across the riverbank, finding us instantly. The helicopter, black and unmarked like the ones before, descended rapidly, landing in a nearby clearing, kicking up dust and debris. Figures in hazmat suits emerged, weapons raised, advancing toward us. "Survivors," one of them yelled, voice muffled by their respirator. "Identify yourselves. Have you been exposed?" Exposure? We were covered in grime. Lena's arm was broken. My ankle was shot. Sarah had bloody scratches on her leg from the infected hand that had grabbed her. Lily was miraculously unharmed but terrified. We looked like hell. But were we infected? Sarah's scratches. How long did it take? We didn't know. They approached cautiously, weapons still trained on us. "Hold position," the leader commanded. "Scan them." One soldier raised a device similar to the scanners I'd seen in sci-fi movies. He swept it over Lena, then Sarah and Lily, then me. The device remained silent. "Clear," the soldier reported. The leader lowered his weapon slightly. "All right, let's get you processed and evacuated. We're establishing a safe zone further inland." He gestured toward the waiting helicopter. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my good knee. We were safe. We were being rescued. As they led us toward the helicopter, I looked back at the Independence Bridge, silhouetted against the rising sun. Wreckage, abandoned cars, the faint shapes of the dead still trapped on its span. It stood as a monument to the day the world broke, a steel cage where I'd spent 12 hours staring into the abyss. We had survived the bridge, survived the first day, but gazing at the hazmat suits and the wary eyes of the soldiers, I knew this wasn't an ending. It was just the beginning of a different kind of cage, a different kind of survival. The world beyond the bridge was just as broken, and the fight was far from over.